Hello everybody, welcome to episode 206 of Show Viewers. Today we'll be going over episode 14 of Daemons of the Shadow Realm. So this episode starts off with us kind of just getting a rerun of the events, a rerun down with Hana and Tadara speaking about what happened in the previous episode towards the end. Then after that we end up swapping to a perspective of Yuru and Ken, who have went out to try and practice their weapons and stuff like that. And ultimately, we see as they're kind of just discussing and all of that, we see as there's a bit of a comedy moment where Ken is explaining the laws of murder and self-defense to Yuru. And then, after that, we ultimately end up seeing as they notice that Daemons are somewhere near. So they try to run away, but ultimately these Daemons end up coming up on them. And then we see as there's a tense moment where Yuru aims his bow at them, but they end up revealing themselves to be friendly. They, in fact, take off, well, they appear to be humans at first, but they end up taking off all their regalia and are, in fact, like these astral beings that are, in fact, Daemons. And they are not aggressive at all. They reveal themselves to be these, guardian spirit Daemons who previously lived in the Japanese area of Noto. And they had been worshipped for a time, but ultimately they were forgotten in the woods. And one day, a stray dog, which they had with them, ended up rolling down a cliff and sprayed its blood upon the statues where they resided. And with this, we see as the dog became formed a contract with these Daemons. And so now they are a pair of two specters, essentially, that walk around with a dog with a little pug. And so, that kind of plays out. And then we end up going back to a perspective with Jin, and Jin ultimately ended up going to the woman's bar that, not Jin, but Tadara ultimately ended up going to Jin's woman's bar. And before that, we saw as Jin interacted with some of the women, Aoi specifically, who he saved with his Daemons, and we see as they discuss briefly, and he doesn't end up revealing the fact that he used Daemons to him. He's just like, oh yeah, I fed him to some fishes, which is technically true. But yeah. So we then see as Tadara and Jin speak about just kind of things that have been going on. Jin ultimately ends up apologizing for the acts that Asa did and sending people to tail Yuru and Tadara and all of them. And so we then see as ultimately Tadara is like, okay, for you to make this up to me, I got something that I need you to do. And then that's kind of where that scene ends. So then we end up going back to the perspective of Ken, right, left, Kotetsu, who's the little cat Daemon that's there as well, and just the entire gang there. And we see as the aliens end up speaking a little bit, well, not the aliens, but the alien-looking Daemons end up speaking a little bit more. We see as they try and reveal what they are called, but it is a Daemon dialect specifically. So we learned two interesting things with these Daemons. Though they're not really important, we learned that animals can in fact form contracts with Daemons, but we also see that Daemons have their own language because these humans cannot pronounce this word, like Yuru and Ken cannot pronounce these words. However, Wright shows that he can. So the Daemons have a specific language, which is pretty interesting. But then we see, out of nowhere, is Oshira-sama ends up coming down with Danji on her back, and we see then as Danji ends up regaling Yuru about all that has happened at the village and everything. But in all of this, Yuru notices something. Danji doesn't have a shadow, and Yuru ends up confronting him. He's like, "Are you a Daemon?" And Danji is in fact a Daemon. Danji has been a Daemon Yuru's entire life. And he ends up revealing himself to be a member of the pair known as Yashiki and Warashi. And these are two Daemons. They're known as the boy and girl Daemon because obviously Asa was the girl Daemon. And now Danji was the male or boy Daemon. So with this, we see then as Yuru gets very mad. He's like, what were you doing? Were you planning to kill me? Were you planning to kidnap me and steal Seal? What were you planning on doing? And then we see as Danji ends up revealing what he in fact planned to do. And he also ends up revealing who his master was because Yuru's like, is your master Granny Yamaha? And he's like, no, my master is not Granny Yamaha. It is the woman I refer to as Mom, Kyoyoko. And this obviously takes Yuru very off guard. He's like, what? And then we see as he explains, or at least Danji explains, about how Kyoko had, tasked Danji with defending Yuru, and she never really asked him to do anything like kill him or harm him or do anything in, malintent toward him. And so that kind of just goes about, and we also see that she was generally just kind of leading Asa, or the girl Daemon, to protect Granny Yamaha if need be. So she was really just using this for scouting reasons and to protect. So we kind of got to figure out what's going on with Kyoko here and who she is affiliated with and what organization with the three main parties we have is she with. But yeah, so Then we see as Yuru is very mad about this because everything he's known, everything he knew up until he left Higashi Village was essentially a lie, and he's infuriated by this. He's outraged. He blames Right and Left at one point. Right and Left were like, he hung out with you every day. We thought you knew that he was a Daemon, and they just kind of have a bit of discourse here, and Yuru is obviously very infuriated by this. And ultimately, he ends up telling him, "Yo, I want to go on my own for a little bit. Right and Left, stay where you are. I don't want you around me. I just want to go and be by myself to kind of absorb what is going on and come to terms with the fact that I've been lied to my entire life." And ultimately, we see as Right and Left begrudgingly agree, but they do allow him to go off on his own, and that's really where the episode ends. Now, this was a very kind of emotionally tumultuous episode for Yuru, because Yuru suffered a lot. Well, I mean, it's kind of just another thing, it's one thing on top of the other. He keeps figuring out that things that she believed were solid entities and subjects within his life were in fact lies, and this is crushing him. It's piling up, and ultimately he kind of snapped here. Not necessarily mentally snapped, but he emotionally snapped. He snapped at Right and Left. He snapped at Danji. He was just broken because of this immense stress that had been put on him, because he cannot discern what is truth and what is fiction. So I'm really ready to see how Yuru ends up handling this and how him going off by himself for a time will play out, because I know there's probably a likelihood of some not Kagemoris, but like the third party coming after him or something like that. So I'm really very excited to see how this plays out in episode 15 and just kind of see where we're going with the story from here, because this episode didn't have too much for it. It had Don's revealing he's a Daemon, us learning that Daemons speak their own language, and Tadera recruiting Jin for this action that he needs to do, and also the idea that animals can create contracts with Daemons, which we didn't know prior, but I doubt that will come into play later on, but it was just kind of cool to learn this. But yeah, so this episode wasn't really an action-packed one, however, it was most certainly an information-packed one. But yeah, that's all it really is for episode 14 of Daemons of the Shadow Realm. That's all we really have for episode 206 of Shelf Review, so thank you very much for watching.